Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to give it a few minutes for people to filter in, and then we'll get started. All right, so looks like we're getting close. So welcome, everyone. You're here for Twilio's forecasting webinar today. I'll be your moderator. We'll introduce the other few people in the room in a minute. All right, but we're going to get going. So before we dive in, just a few housekeeping things. If everyone could use the Q&A section of their Zoom to ask any questions, you can ask questions throughout the presentation and we'll be answering them. If there's a common question coming up, we will also make sure to bulk answer that live. And if you could include your company when you ask a question, that way if it's a niche or very specific, we'll follow up with you directly on that. These questions are private, so no one can see the questions you're asking or what company you're coming from. Only us as moderators at Twilio can see that. For each example of forecasting that Trey's going to go through, he'll give a quick context demonstration, and then there will be time for questions at the end. Again, put all those in through the question box. I'll be prompting Trey with those live. And then we'll also have about 30 minutes of content and then more Q&A at the end. So if you have general questions related to Twilio or overall, we will answer those as well. I'm Lacey Rotzart, the solution consultant here at Twilio. I've met with a lot of you, whether it's through a demo or on the customer success side. Spent about 10 years of my career in TJX in planning and merchandising before joining Twilio, and I've been here for about a year and a half. The goal of today's webinar is to share some examples of what retailers that we work with daily at Twilio, their real life forecasting examples, and provide forecasting framework for you to use in the future. This is all being recorded, so we can share that as well. All right. So now the star of the show, Trey, I'll let him introduce himself and he'll take it over from here.
All right. Hi, everybody. It's nice to meet those of you that I have not yet met. I know it's through virtual, and some of you I believe I've likely had various training calls with. My name is Trey. I have been with Twilio for just about a year and a half as well. Lacey and I joined right around the same time. Right now, I'm working on the customer success team, really with a focus around training customers on workflows, working with them to develop a way that they can utilize Twilio best for their organization. My background is also in planning and merchandising. For about 4 years, I was between Puma, and most of my time was at TJX. And then Lacey, I think we can dive into our agenda for today. So today we will be going through forecasting items that have what we would consider unreliable history. There's a couple different things that could define what unreliable history is, and we'll go through that when we get to the specific examples, but largely it's going to be some out of stocks, places where maybe your sizes don't align with what you historically sell or what you really think you sell for an item. And then also instances where maybe you have a core product that you're introducing a new color, so you don't have a great history on that because it's just selling or it hasn't even sold yet. And then also other places where it is just maybe a new item. There's a couple ways that we'll go through different forecasting methodologies that you can work through some of those situations as you build your plans within Twilio. As we continue moving forward, I know that there is a mix of customers on this call, so I do want to give a quick level set on one of the menus that you'll see pop up very frequently. We'll be navigating through this menu probably 5 or 6 times today. This is going to be our forecast menu. So once I share screen, you'll have a better insight of what this looks like, but just to orient everyone, there's a lot of different inputs and selections that you can choose here. The main ones we're going to focus on are within our seasonality and seasonality groups, and then our volume. So your seasonality is really going to be representative of what sales curve do you wish to apply to the specific item that you're forecasting. And then your volume, that's more related to the trend that you want to apply. We'll get into what some of those trends look like, but this is the main piece that we're going to focus on today. And you'll see this menu again, 5 or 6 times as we run through each function within the tool. Awesome. All righty, Lacey, you think we're ready?
I think we're ready. So Trey's going to take over now, share the screen. I'll be monitoring those questions in the background, as I mentioned. And just to also point out, Peter Leith is here. He is our VP of product. He'll be helping us field a lot of those questions as well. So Peter and I will be working in the background. Focus your attention on Trey.
Awesome. All righty, let me share my screen and we will get into item plan. So we'll load this up. What you're seeing right now on your screen is what item plan is going to look like when you initially dive into it. I won't spend too much time on orientation, as we can go through that with either your implementation specialist or within any demos that you might be interested in. But one thing to recognize here is there's a whole lot of products. So for the sake of today's exercises, I am going to filter this down so that it's a little bit more clearly aligned. I'm going to just filter this to this sweater right here. So we have it named product 1, 2. So in Tulio, any function that you want to do, any menu that you're going to open is a right click. So we're going to right click on that style name, and then I can just choose right here in this menu, filter by, and that will filter down to that specific product that I am looking at. And now you can see it's a little bit more digestible of information. 3 different iterations of this in different colors, all a lightweight sweater. So, you know, we're in June. This is definitely a time of year where sweaters are probably tapering out. Maybe you're thinking, hey, what are we going to be doing with them as we head toward the back half of the summer season and into fall? And you're looking at reforecasting based on some of those ebbs and flows within your business. So to dive in, as we go through this, one of the general concepts within Tulio obviously is forecasting. That's why we are all here. There's a lot of different ways that we can forecast, and I'll quickly touch on just the super basic core product. Let's say these have been selling year over year. We like the trends, we trust the trends, and we're pretty confident that our size scales have been accurate as we're rolling through this, because it's something we reorder very frequently. For orientation's sake, again, when you're in this view, you're going to right click on whatever product or products that you want to forecast. You'll have the options of various different options in this menu, but the main one is functions. Within functions, that will break out a larger menu that has even more things that you're able to do. We'll focus today on forecasting. So when I click forecasting, that menu is going to pop up that we saw earlier on the presentation. One thing to note is often when you open it up, it might actually look like this. We have defaults and an override of those defaults. Today, we're going to be overriding a lot of defaults. I'll circle back to what a default means toward the end of the examples that I'm sharing today. But essentially, it's a way to more quickly forecast items within Tulio based on specific definitions and filters that you've saved for the methodology that you may want to use. So when I come in here, I'll click override defaults, and you'll see that this is sticky. So it will save whatever the last process I was going through, it will save some of those overrides. If we were doing this and say we loved this product, you know, this is the ideal state, we would come into our seasonality method and we'd make an adjustment. Right now it's on item plan. We'll talk about that later. But the main thing that we do in our forecasting menu is our sales history. So that would utilize the sales history of an item, looking back about 52 weeks. You can make adjustments depending on what you do or don't want to look at. And then it considers a rolling average of how smooth or jagged you want your sales plans to look based on the history that you know about that specific item. So in this case, let's just, for the sake of level setting, we trust that week over week, it sells pretty smoothly. We trust the way that looks. So I would run a forecast and it would give me a result. Now, that's ideal state. Today, we're going to focus on things that are a little less than ideal. In these instances, unreliable history might be a reason. And one of those reasons might be that either you had some out of stocks last year, or you had size selling that just didn't really make much sense to the way that it normally tracks. Any reason that would really deem your product that the last full year of history, the last 52 weeks, or even beyond, if you're going further, isn't a great indicator of how that product is selling, right? So Forecasting method number 1 is going to be forecasting an item that has that unreliable history. Maybe it's current, it's been selling and it's a core item. You like the way that it's been selling currently, but again, if you look back in time, it doesn't feel really great. So rather than choosing our seasonality method of sales history, we actually would leverage one of our other modules, our merchandise plan, to build a curve to this item while still utilizing the trend that you're seeing. So to do that, you go down to your seasonality groups. You're going to make sure that you choose merchandise plan, and we're going to deselect our like for like here. So when we have our merchandise plan choose, it will open up the seasonality groups. And this is going to be from where do you want your curve to come from? So since we're talking merch plan, generally that would be, a division, a class, a category. Maybe you want to go a higher level and you just want to do it the category. But what this will do is this will say, it will look at the trend the curve that you've built into your merchandise plan. It will apply that shape utilizing the current selling trend of your item. So if you've planned a dip in July for sweaters, this will mirror that same dip in July, regardless of what your history showed last year, because we're utilizing our merch plan to build out that seasonality. Once we've selected merch plan, we'll go through, it will stay same as target, and we'll use the scenario master because that's the scenario that we're in. For seasonality groups, these are all going to be representative of groupings within your merchandise plan. So I will choose in this example, division, department, and I want to go down to the class level because I'm just looking at sweaters. Once I've chosen that, I'll make sure that I adjust my volume. So again, the volume is going to be the trend that you're utilizing. You can do anything from last week all the way out to 12 weeks, and you can even customize it depending on what you really want to look at. For the sake of today, I'm going to do the last 4 weeks. The last month of sales feels good. I like the way that looks. My volume factor, I will ignore. I don't need to worry about that right now. We'll get into how we manipulate that in a little bit of the other examples that we have. Once all of this is selected, I will ignore my size spreads, and then I don't need to worry about this advanced menu. I'm just going to hit forecast. And you'll see that this loads, and then you're going to get a result that populates into your sales plan. And now this result is going to be representative of the merchandise plan levels that you have selected. So in an instance where maybe you did plan your product down from the continuing weeks, like we did the black one. So if we're looking at week 23 here, where I've highlighted through 26, you can see that there's a dip. And that dip actually goes below LY, but maybe as a planner, hey, I had a reason that I did this. I planned my merch plan down, so it does make sense that that shape will go down. Also, if you're ever curious to kind of see what does my shape look like, you have these visualizations to the left side, but you can also toggle on and off a larger visualization. We'll use this throughout the examples, but you have this visualization on the right. You'll just click into that and you can select the metrics that you want to look at. So let's look at our gross sales units for this black sweater. And you can see from the planned period that you're looking at, where are those peaks and where are those valleys? So as we head toward July, we've planned this style down, and then maybe it starts to ramp up as you head into August and the later months of the season. There's a little bit of a dip toward the back half of the year. Maybe your sweater weights change. And then as you head toward like resort time, for example, maybe, hey, people are going to be looking for lighter weight sweaters. So we're going to see that lift. In this example, you've leveraged the work you've done in your merch plan to apply a seasonality curve against a current selling trend of this specific item. Now, as we move through this, Lacey will be keeping track of any questions. So she definitely will be stopping me if anything's come through as we move through examples. Lacey, are you feeling good about where we are right now and ready to move on to the next one?
Yep. The only question we've got so far is if this is going to be recorded, which we are recording, and we can share it after as well.
Beautiful. All righty. So I'm going to just turn my visualization off so that we can move through this. In the vein of this same example, there is another situation where you still have that history that you don't really feel super confident about. Again, maybe it's sizing, maybe it's just out of stock, sell Y, whatever it might be, or maybe it even launched in the middle of last year. You just don't feel confident about the full year of selling. But you might find yourself in a place where this specific style that I'm looking at, let's just say it's this blue item, product 1, 2, but in the blue color. I need to be a little bit more specific on how I'm forecasting this. Maybe my merchandise plan is just at a level that's a little bit too high for what I want to look at, and I want to get just a little more granular. So this item would be where you have a good trend, your history is unreliable, but again, that merch plan method just doesn't feel as accurate as you want it to be, and you want to have a little bit more specificity as it aligns to maybe another item. So what we would do in this case is we would use our like-for-like method. So again, we'll come in, we'll use this blue example. We'll right click into our functions menu and you'll hit forecast. This will open up that same menu again. And you can note the stickiness of the menu items in here is that everything we did from the last forecast lives in your menu until you make a change, right? So like for like, what does that mean? That means that I have another item whose curve I like and curves that I want to kind of mirror. And maybe it's a little bit more specific than the general curve I've built in my merch plan. So I want to plan this blue sweater, let's say off of the black sweater. That's that core item. I love the way that it sells. And I know that it makes sense. And maybe it is a little bit differently aligned to my merch plan based on some historical information that I know. So what we'll do here is, again, we have our override defaults selected. And in my seasonality group, I'm going to actually select my like for like. What this will do is this changes your options and it brings you the ability to add filters. For this example, I will filter to my style name. I'll first make sure that I've changed my seasonality method to be sales history, because that will change what you can and can't filter. So I'll go back to my filters and we'll go to style name. Style name of this is that product 1, 2. And then I'm also going to product. Let's make sure I spelled that right. There we go. I'm also going to add in another filter for just today's example, where I'm going to add in the color. Maybe I want to get super specific and just look at black. So these colors and these options are all defined in your tenant as you go through configuration with your implementation specialist. So once I've selected that, I can just click out and that adds those filters down to the options over here. For seasonality, what this does is the sales history will be utilized. We'll look back from today, 52 weeks backwards. So we have a full year of sales. And again, I'm just going to choose a rolling average of 1 week. If you wanted to smooth it out a little bit more, you can choose a longer time frame that will just create a more smooth plan if you knew that there was like jagged selling for some reason. The sales history that will be utilized, though, is going to be the history of the black item, not the history of the blue item, because we don't trust the blue item's history. We like the black item's history, so we're going to use that to develop our seasonality. From a volume perspective, however, we will utilize the volume of the current item that we're selling. You know, we've been selling it. We like the way it sells. So we'll keep the volume. Again, you can choose your trend. We'll keep 4 weeks and our volume factor will stay 100%, meaning that it will just keep that full percentage of its current volume. Once we have all this selected, again, we'll run our forecast. And this will then produce for us a sales plan in the weeks that you see up here, weeks 22 through 27. This is goes beyond, it goes all the way out to, I think, week 40, my little screen is in the way, but week like 48 is what we're looking at. So it goes all the way out as long as the time period that you're looking at. And again, for the sake of throwing on our visualization here, we can look and compare both of them. So I'll pull in both of the items that we just forecasted, the yellow line being our black and the blue line being the blue sweater. And you can see here, because the black sells so much more, it's obviously a little bit higher. And that's where you can see that the blue item is a little bit more smooth as we go through this, but it still follows the shape of the black item. Again, just because of the way that the graph works, you're not seeing as much of an ebb and a flow as you are with the black item, just because the units are a little bit smaller from the volume that we're currently selling at. But you can see that where this style dips, the blue one will dip. And again, where the black style increases in sales, the blue sweater also increases in sales. So these two methodologies, merchandise plan and like for like, are what you can utilize when you have an item whose trend you like, and you know that the history isn't as trustworthy as you wish it could be. You don't necessarily like it, or there's reasons based on delays or whatever it might be that cause an issue in last year's sales. One quick piece I want to touch on before we pause for another set of questions is a little bit more of another specificity that you could add on to your forecasting methodologies. So what we've been doing right now has been using history, and it's been using trend. And those trends, although we're looking at the style level, they do technically go down to the, right now it's style color, but it would also go down to the size level. So underneath these sweaters, there are various sizes that you're going to have. Let's say it's small through large. There might be a reason where you're selling by size. For whatever reason, you as a planner decide, you know, I'm scenario playing and I want to see what would happen if we actually sold with this size scale. Or I know last year that we blew out of mediums and we kind of over-indexed on other sides because people either sized up or sized down. Whatever reason that might be, you want to adjust it to make the size break a little bit more accurate to what you think you're going to sell this year. Vice versa, maybe your current trend, you're like way over extending one size and you want to bring that down a little bit to make sure that you account for the other sizes that you historically know you might be selling. You can assign manually a size spread. So you'd go through the same process. We'd go to functions, forecast. We could still use the same methodology that we have here, but this optional size spread section, that we can bring that in. So if you've gone in your tool and you've defined size spreads, you can choose what that would be, and that would weight your size projections a little bit differently than you historically or trend-wise have sold. So in this case, let's just say I'm going to use the outerwear size, right? So we'll look at fall outerwear. If I had a sweater size curve, that's the one that I would utilize. But what this will do is I'll select this and I would just run my forecast again. I'm not going to run it today just for the sake of the way that the view is filtered, but from an explanation standpoint, what this will do is say, if your sales are broken out where it's, you know, 20% small, 20% medium, and then the rest shakes out within that, those percentages, those weights will be held within your unit sales plan. So this 813 units would be broken down into your defined size spread. Whereas in the first iteration of this forecast, that 813 was broken down based on the current trend of the sales that you are moving through. So that is kind of part one, if you will. There's a part two that we'll dive into, but part one is really forecasting these items with either merch plan or like for like, where the history is not great. It's a core item or it's been selling. So you have a trend that you like, but you want to make sure that you're applying a proper seasonality curve. Lacey, before we move on to kind of our second section of this, are there any other questions that have come up?
Nope, the only ones you covered. One was asking for like, which we just went through, a new item with no sales history, and another question related to size curves, which again, you just answered. So doing great. Keep it up.
Beautiful. All righty. That sounds great. So for navigational sake, I'm going to just tab over to another tab. We're going to switch our products. All right. So we're going to move over to this jacket. Lacey, I think you mentioned that one of the questions was related to a new item without any history, which is one of the things that I will touch on here. So a couple things that could be going on, right? You have a new item that maybe you've gone through the work already in your assortment plan module. You've planned this newer item. You've based it off of an average per week. As we go through this, you'll do some work to build out those assortments. And eventually, once you agree that your assortment looks the way that you'd like it to look, you'll take that and you'll push it over into your item plan. Pushing that over into your item plan is going to result in a sales plan, but it's going to result in a sales plan that looks similar to this midnight option we have here at the bottom, where based on an average per week and the planned weeks of sales, I was generated a sales plan. In this case, my average per week looks like it was about 200. So my sales plan now across the board just says 200. You can notice that I don't have any LY information and I don't have a current trend. So your question probably is, how do I forecast that then? Because realistically, I mean, it would be awesome if we knew we could just sell 200 a week and close our books and be done. But we all know that that unfortunately is not how our consumers react. So obviously with this jacket, there's likely going to be some peaks and some valleys within its sales curve. So what we would do is we are able to run a forecast. However, the volume that we would use would be different than the volume that we've used in previous examples. So in this case, just like the other ones, you go back in, open up your function menu and come into your forecast. Your defaults are saved and we're going to make some changes here. So we'll continue on with our like for like. We're going to hang out here in like for a while. So we are leveraging other products. I'm going to make some adjustments to the actual item that I am using. So in this case, what I will do is I'll adjust my filters where my style name is now the Blake jacket. And my color would be, it will stay black. So I'm utilizing the black Blake jacket to adjust the curve of the Blake jacket, the new one that we're offering in Midnight. Again, these sales plans were generated from the work that you did in assortment plan. And that's something as well as we're going through this. If you don't have the assortment plan module or it's something you're interested in, definitely let us know in those questions. And we can also kind of foray that into any conversations after the webinar. So we've selected the jacket. We're going to utilize our seasonality method of the sales history because we're using the history of the black jacket. Again, we'll keep that plan year and you can decide your rolling average. But what we will change is our volume. So you've already gone through all the work of determining a general sales plan and you feel good about it from a total unit perspective, right? So these 200 units across the board for, let's say 26 weeks. I can't do that quick math in my head, but we can assume that that's going to be a specific number of sales. What we're going to choose in our volume is the option at the very bottom, which says spread current. Spread current means take the current volume of the plan that I have in there or of what I'm looking at and spread it out utilizing the seasonality of my like for like item. So what this is going to do is this is going to take your 200 per week and it's going to spread it out to be much more realistic based on that like for like item that you've chosen. In this example today, we're doing it specific to an item. However, if you wanted to, you could change the level at which you are performing a like for like and spread current. If you knew that maybe you wanted to go a little bit higher out of a level and do it at a class, you could pull in your class instead of your style, and then it would still spread out that plan, but the curve that it's utilizing is now at a higher level. And it's, in this case, it's, let's say class, so it would be jackets. It will look at all of your jacket selling and then use that curve rather than the specific curve of this jacket. You can determine what level of like for like you want to do. It doesn't always have to be an item. It could be a class or category, really depending on what you as a planner are trying to get at. Once we've gone through all of this, we've made our selections. In this case, your size spread was already defined in your assortment plan workflows. You assign that when you go through there. So that's broken out. And then when you push that item back into your item plan below what we see here, so these 200 units are broken out into the respective sizes based on what you already defined in your assortment plan workflow. So you don't have to worry about that in this case. We'll hit forecast and we'll also use a volume factor of 100 just so that we utilize all the units that are planned. This forecast now will generate for us, and it should generate a sales plan. In this case, it's potential that I have edited something, but I can show you the results here where you see that this is the initial plan that we got of the black jacket where it was 219, 215, 217. So it ebbed and flowed. And then down here, these 200 units per week, they're a little bit lower than where the black has been selling. So naturally it will bring them down a little bit. But you can see that now rather than 200 units a week, it actually has adjusted sales numbers. And as you flow deeper into the season, the places where the black jacket sales increase, the midnight jackets sales also increase. Another great way to look at that is utilizing that visualization as a graph, so you can see exactly how this sold, where these first 4 weeks are your actualized weeks. So you haven't sold it yet. So that's why it's 0. And then you can see the first week that it starts selling, they are right in line with each other, just a little bit below, because you plan the midnight to be less of a contributor than the black jacket, but they're mirrored almost apples to apples all the way through week 48 of 2023. Within the same vein, you can also utilize like for like of an item and get, even more specific with something. So in this case, maybe you are forecasting an item that has a new color, right? It's a proven style and it just has a new color. Maybe you didn't go through the work of planning all of this in AP. You did it a little bit differently. And what this would result in is a different way of populating that sales plan. So as we've gone through all these methodologies, we have a decision tree that we can share that exists within our help center, and it will guide you kind of in your direction. There are some instances where 2 options might be viable, and it doesn't mean that one is right or wrong, or one is better or worse. It really just means that you get to decide, all right, what do I really want to look at? And what do I want to focus on as I'm trending my products, planning my products, especially in instances where you might be like scenario playing for some reason. You're kind of playing that what if. I remember the amount of stretch plans that we would have to make. So this is a great way that you can kind of say, hey, what happens if we do it this way? Or what happens if we do it that way? You can have different scenarios, and then you can compare them more toward the end. The last methodology that we'll go through is utilizing our like for like, and we'll utilize the seasonality of an item plan rather than its history. So this will look just a little bit different. This would be in a case where, again, it's that proven style. So we'll use this same jacket and we'll say that this blank jacket is proven style. We like it. We've gone through a lot of work of creating an item plan to align with what we want it to look like. Maybe we knew that there were some promotions this year that we were offering that the tool obviously wouldn't know about. So we bumped up sales in certain weeks that historically wouldn't have been bumped up. So this item plan that I've put in, this black one, I put a lot of work into, and I want to use that and leverage that against my midnight new style that I'm planning. In this case, we will go into just one more window just for the sake of what we're looking at. So there's 0 plans here. You have nothing planned. It's just that new color, and you're going to leverage your black one to plan midnight. We'll right click into functions. We'll go into forecast. And again, your menu will open up. For like, we'll still have this selected. We'll use the blank jacket and it will be black. For your seasonality method, however, it will be item plan. So when you change your seasonality method to item plan, it does clear out your filters. You'll just come back in and you can put them back. So this is going to be a great workflow for situations where you've planned core colors and maybe you offer a new 1 or 2, and you know that, all right, midnight sells at X% of black. So that's how we're going to leverage that. So once we have this planned, we'll go into the Blake jacket. I'll also add just in that color. And again, we'll do black. Now we have item plan, we have same as target, and we have master. Our volume, we're going to change. This will be a volume trend of however many weeks you want to use. We've been sticking with 4. We'll stay with 4. Now you'll notice this was checked, but it's a toggle. There's your volume where it says use like for like volume trend. So this is our LAF method, and we're utilizing our like for like volume trend as well. So truly what we're doing is we're saying the black blank jacket, Blake jacket is tried and true. we like the current trend and we like the plan that we've created for it. I have a new color, it has no sales, so I don't have any trend, I don't have any info that I can really generate a plan from. So I'm going to leverage the black items to plan the midnight offering. This is where you'll use that like for like volume trend. So we'll use the volume trend of the black color. And again, it will then take into account the seasonality of the black color's item plan to generate your plan for blue or midnight. Your volume factor, this is where we do actually want to play with this. So for a volume factor, if it was 100, it would apples for apples spit out the same plan that I'm using for my black. But I know that midnight sells a little bit differently. So maybe it's 50% of black historically across all of my offerings that have both of those colors. I've kind of done the work already on that and I know what it looks like. We'll ignore our size spread because we're going to use the trend of our black selling right now. But again, if you wanted to assign it, you could assign it here to get a little bit more specific. And we will hit forecast. And once this loads, you'll be able to see that you now have a sales plan that's generated for your midnight item. And it is 50% lower than the sales plan for your black color. Now, again, with some rounding, it might not be like totally apples to apples because we can't give you half units, but you should be able to go in here and do some of the math and see like, yep, this is 50%. If we visualize it, you can do the same thing and see it's the same shape, but it's just half of the units that we're selling. So I know that we covered a lot of topics and I tried not to speak too quickly, but I want to be cognizant of everyone's time and any questions that we have toward the end. But to recap, these were 4, maybe 5, if you include assigning a size spread options for forecasting items that are in various states of selling, but they might not have history that you trust. And as we move into this, again, if there's any questions that come up relating to any of these methodologies or anything you want to see more of, definitely do not hesitate to reach out to your AEs, your CSMs, your IS, whoever it may be, and we can get some of these conversations started. And we're going to foray into some time for questions. So Lacey, if there's anything that we haven't covered or anything outstanding, I'd love to answer some of the questions before we wrap up.
Sorry, had myself muted. So I've covered most of them off. A few more are coming in. So we're going to start at the top. Is there a way to do this for 2 seasonal colors? So the example is taking black's curve from a previous year to project midnight blue for this year, assuming black and midnight are both seasonal in different years. So an example of that would be, yes, you can do that. You would forecast midnight off a like for like of black's history, but then you might want to forecast black off of its own sales history or different seasonality curve.
Yeah, thanks, Lacey.
Another one is, so does this mean the user will run a forecast at the merch level and then again at the item level? This is a great question, which really is the connectivity of Toolio. So in our merchandise planning module, which Trey, if you want to just kind of hover over at the top and see how that is another module within the tool, that's where you're doing your top line sales planning. So at the total for the total company throughout the levels of your merchandise hierarchy, there is forecast functionality in that module that's very similar to what Trey took you through today. But again, that's doing it at the product hierarchy level. All those forecasts that Trey just took you through were at the item level. You can then reconcile between your merchandise plan and your item level demand plan. So this is top down, bottoms up reconciliation, which is the true unlock of end-to-end merchandise planning that we allow within the tool. Today's demonstration was really focused on that item level forecast, but I do not want to negate the importance of that top down planning as well, which we do support. And then how could I apply a launch lift for a new color? So this might be a good time for potentially Peter to chime in about a few things that are on our roadmap.
Yeah, sorry about that. I can definitely chime in there, but ultimately Trey covered this with the ability to use a like for like. for a new color. It's a very similar concept. I do think that this is where we would talk a little bit about the assortment planning module for managing newness in general, and the ability to, I mean, you've obviously got the ability right here to use a like-for-like to generate a forecast, but ultimately in the assortment planning module, you have the ability to plan multiple new products. You have the ability to plan the flow of those new products when they're expected to launch. And you have the ability to use slightly different functions, such as modeling a new product over a group of similar products, as opposed to just selecting one like-for-like. So in our new assortment planning, there is this ability to model like-for-like products, or to model a group of like-for-like products, as well as coming up with a curve that is either based on a specific set of products or one single product, or it could be a whole category of products. I think that is where you would manage most of your newness. But as Trey has already pointed out in the demonstration, that you can do it right here.
Awesome. Thanks, Peter. You're muted again, Lacey.
Every time. That wraps up all the questions that I have coming in, unless there's any additionals people want to put in at this time. All right, so I'm gonna, Trey, if you want to stop sharing.
Yeah.
So that does wrap up the webinar for today. Obviously, thank everyone for their time. There are some resources at help.twilio.com. You can always search for things like forecasting if you wanted to see some of that merchandise planning forecasting there as well. We'll be sending this recording out as well as some of those resources. Give everyone a few minutes back in their day, and thank you all for attending.
Thanks, everyone.